have a nice evening out, something.
Okay. Yeah, countdown is on. So after this morning, I've got 2 more Sundays. I'm actually counting it in terms of preaches. So this is my penultimate preach before I'm away for 3 months. And really looking forward to some quality time with Jesus and with family and the space, the headspace to just hear God afresh and be renewed. So yeah, really looking forward to that. Well, it's great to be together. If you're here as a visitor, it's great to have you with us. One thing we do give time to every week, actually, is to considering the message of the Bible. We're currently, aren't we, joining God's Old Testament community in their journey through the wilderness. If you're familiar with some of the Bible story, you might be familiar with that. You may even have seen animations about the Exodus, Moses leading the people out of Egypt across the Red Sea. Well, they then had quite a long season of traveling together through the wilderness, following a cloud that was a phenomenon that was supernatural. It was a manifestation of God's presence among them. And we're looking at this journey, which Paul says was recorded for our instruction as New Testament believers, as God's New Testament people. Paul speaks of it in that way in 1 Corinthians. And in fact, in Acts chapter 7, Stephen, as he's recounting the history of God's people shortly before his own martyrdom, he refers to Israel in the wilderness in this way. He calls it the church, or the ecclesia. He uses that word in the Greek translation. That's the word that means church, in the wilderness. So there's something of a model for us here in this community on the move, journeying together, following the cloud through the wilderness, that models and is a foretaste of God's New Testament community. And we are on these Sunday mornings picking out some of the way markers along their journey, and we're applying it to our own journey as a local church, as Junction Church. We are on a journey together, aren't we? Give me a nod if you believe that. We're moving, we're going somewhere. We've come from somewhere, and we are moving forward into good things that God has in store for us. And so we are looking at this journey and thinking, well, at this moment in our life together, as we continue to move forward into all God has for us, what are some lessons that we can learn? And we're learning a number of things. Let me just recap and remind you of a few things. We're learning that we must be a people who prioritize God's manifest presence. Moses says, unless you go with us, we don't want to take a step forward. And we want that to be our heart cry, don't we? Lord, we need you in the midst of us. A people of God's manifest presence, flexible, faith-filled, and unified. We're learning also that we need to be a people who prioritize prayer. We're prioritizing a season of that at the moment in our small groups and at the end of the month as we gather to pray, recognizing that every battle that we will face in the course of that journey is not going to be won by clever strategy or human resources, but only as we give ourselves to persevering, faith-filled intercession. That's another lesson we've looked at. And then last time we looked at the fact that we need to be a people who trust God to provide for us in the wilderness, sustain us on this journey. We need to be those that are looking to heaven's resources. Our short history as a church is full of moments where God has opened windows of heaven over us. We when we started, gathered in a tiny little corner of this space up here on the top floor. And then we had moments where we had the opportunity to expand and to refurbish, and that meant looking to God to release resources and making the kind of sacrifices that were needed in response to what God was calling us to. We need to be a people who trust God to provide, and as we continue to move forward, we'll continue to need to see windows in heaven open for God to provide all that we need on this journey. So there's a few things there that we've been looking up on. We're going to move on this morning and look at another incident, and it's in Numbers chapter 10. And they have, by this point, made their way out of Egypt down through This area here to the east of the Red Sea, they fought the battle against the Amalekites. They are beginning to experience manna from heaven. And then they have that big moment at Mount Sinai. And then in Numbers 10, we read that during the second year, in the second month, on the 20th day of the month, the cloud was lifted up above the tabernacle of the testimony. And the Israelites traveled on from the wilderness of Sinai. Okay, that's that area in the south, moving from one place to the next until the cloud stopped in the wilderness of Paran. They set out for the first time according to the Lord's command through Moses. The military divisions of the camp of Judah's descendants with their banner set out first, and Nashon, son of Amminadab, was over their divisions. Nathanael, son of Zuar, was over the division of the tribe of Issachar's descendants, and Eliab, son of Helon, was over the division of the tribe of Zebulun's descendants. The tabernacle was then taken down, and the Gershonites and the Merarites set out, transporting the tabernacle. The military divisions of the camp of Reuben with their banner set out, and Eliezer, son of Shedeur, was over their divisions. Shalumiel, son of Zerushaddai, was over the division of the tribe of Simeon's descendants, and Eliasaph, son of Deuel, was over the division of the tribe of Gad's descendants. The Kohathites then set out, transporting the holy objects. The tabernacle was to be set up before their arrival. Next, the military divisions of the camp of Ephraim's descendants with their banner set out, and Elishama, son of Ammihud, was over their divisions. Gamaliel, son of Pedazur, was over the division of the tribe of Manasseh's descendants, and Abidan, son of Gideoni, was over the division of the tribe of Benjamin's descendants. The military divisions of the camp of Dan's descendants with their banner set out, serving as a rear guard for all the camps. And Ahiezer, son of Ammishaddai, was over their divisions. Pagiel, son of Ochran, was over the division of the tribe of Asher's descendants, and Ahira, son of Enan, was over the division of the tribe of Naphtali's descendants. This was the order of march for the Israelites by their military divisions as they set out. And Moses said to Hobab, descendant of Reuel, the Midianite, and Moses' relative by marriage, we're setting out for the place the Lord has promised. I will give it to you. Come with us, and we will treat you well. I think another translation says, come with us, and we will do you good. For the Lord has promised good things to Israel. But he replied to him, I don't want to go. Instead, I'll go to my own land and my own relatives. Please don't leave us, Moses said, since you know where we should camp in the wilderness, and you can serve as our eyes. If you come with us, whatever good the Lord does for us, we will do for you. And they set out from the mountain of the Lord on a 3-day journey with the ark of the Lord's covenant traveling ahead of them for those 3 days to seek a resting place for them. Meanwhile, the cloud of the Lord was over them by day when they set out from the camp. I want to talk this morning about playing our part, because what we have here in this description is a fascinating insight into how they were organized together, as well as this little interesting interaction of Moses with his in-law. It may have been his father-in-law or brother-in-law, Hobab, who becomes part of this community, joins them at the point at which they're already on their way, and Moses invites him to join them and to bring his gifts to them to help them. So I want to talk first about what we learn here about a God-given arrangement. We're all very familiar, I think, aren't we, in the past few years of some of those images on the news of mass migrations. You've seen some of those images, great long trains of people who are moving with as much as they can carry from one place to another. And we've seen the chaos involved in those human caravans. We've seen the way in which aid agencies can really struggle to manage the chaos of those crowds. And that might be what comes into our mind as we read through Numbers and Exodus and think of this journey through the wilderness. We're thinking of a great chaotic human caravan through the wilderness. A vast, disorganized rabble of people, numbering hundreds and hundreds of thousands. Well, what Numbers 10 tells us very categorically is that is not the case. That's not what it was like. What we learn here in Numbers 10 is that on one level, this was a highly organized operation. I think I referred before to the way in which it actually resembled a pretty standard military campaign. So here in the wilderness, we have not a vast, disorganized, chaotic rabble, but actually a body of people who are clearly organized along military lines, each with their divisions, with their own military standards, their own generals, if you like, as well, within their tribes. Every family, every clan, every tribe had its designated place. There was an order. There was an order by which they set out, and there was an order by which they camped. They had their own identified leaders. We read some of those tricky names, or I read some of those tricky names. They knew who their leaders were. They were named, identified. And they had their own identified flags or banners, military standards. There's an image there of actually what it looked like when they camped. You can see that. I mean, that's an engineer's dream, isn't it? That kind of military precision and organization with precise numbers and a precise placement, all, of course, around the tabernacle. And so the first thing I want us to recognize here is that as we follow the cloud in our journey through the wilderness, there is a place for what I've called God-given arrangement or organization or structure. Now, I'm not suggesting that the New Testament church somehow follows a military-style measure of organization and that we create hard lines of organization. But I think what we can learn here from this is that some measure of organization and leadership, which I think probably go together, has a part to play in our journey as we move forward to lay hold of the things that God has promised us. And that it's naive to think that without that, this group of 800,000+ people would have somehow just managed to work it all out between themselves. There was a need clearly here for a measure of organization and leadership to ensure that they moved forward together as a cohesive whole. I mean, just think about it. Think about the process of 800,000 people breaking camp and moving on, and then again settling down to camp. Imagine if, when the cloud moved on, everyone suddenly pulled up their tent pegs and surged forward to follow the cloud. It would have been chaos. That's not how it happened. We know what happens in those kind of situations. We've seen the tragic images of Hillsborough and other crowd surges where there's just a lack of order. Well, that's not what happened. When the cloud moved, they broke camp and they peeled off one by one. It began with Judah, then Issachar, then Zebulun, then Reuben. They went clockwise like this. And in order, each tribe peeled off and moved forward. And then the next tribe peeled off and moved forward. Imagine when they settled. If as soon as the cloud stopped, they all rushed to get the very best camping spot around the tabernacle, and no one knew where anyone else was going to camp. It would have been chaos. If you've been to the Commission Festival, you'll know even with 20 families arriving on camp, it can be a little bit like that. If things aren't allocated and there's not a measure of organization, it can be a bit chaotic. This is 800,000 plus people camping. I mean, it just would not have worked. The record mentions the Gershonites and the Merarites. They were the people who set up the tabernacle. And so they needed to get there first because behind them there was another tribe that were carrying all the articles that needed to go in the tabernacle. Now imagine if you got that the wrong way round. It just would not have worked. And it would actually have caused relational tension. There was a measure then of organization and leadership that encouraged cohesion and unity. Now, what I'm not saying, as I've just qualified before, is that somehow in the New Testament we follow a kind of military-style measure of organization. That's not New Testament language. The New Testament doesn't describe the church as divisions or military units in this way, but it does describe the church, first and foremost, as a body. And a body has a measure of organization around it. Paul speaks of the body as something that clearly reflects a God-given, spirit-led arrangement or organization around the gifts that God gives within God's New Testament community. So this is what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 12, verse 18. God has arranged each one of the parts in the body just as he wanted. 1 Corinthians 12:28, God has appointed, it's the same word, arranged, these in the church. First apostles, second prophets, third teachers, next miracles, then gifts of healing, helping, leading, various kinds of tongues. So what I'm wanting to help us understand is that the church as a community, a New Testament community, is not just a random rabble of people or a disorganized collection of parts. It is a body of arranged members. And those members are arranged in a way that is intentional and purposeful. That means that if you are part of this church, that's not a random thing. You didn't just happen to end up at Junction Church. I believe God arranges the members in the body. And if you're here by conviction, as I hope you are here by divine appointment. And as we follow the cloud and press into all that God has in store for us, we are wanting to work out how God is organizing his church. We want to be not just randomly landing here, but connected, every one of us, as functioning members of a body by God's design with a part to play. The New Testament's very clear. The gospel is preached, individuals respond, but that's not where it ends. Just a crowd of people who have made a response to Jesus. What happens then is that local bodies are formed and local eldership is appointed and deacons are recognized also. There's a sense in which the crowd, if you like, is formed together into a local, cohesive body of people. And within that body of people, there are some who are, by the grace of God, given gifts of leadership. Some who are called to eldership. And there are also gifts of administration. And so as we follow the cloud, and as we lay hold of what God has in store for us, I want to suggest at this moment in time, as we look forward, we will need more and more and more gifts of leadership. And we will need more gifts of administration. We're going to be praying before we end this morning for those who feel a call to that, because I felt particularly God wants to put his hand on people who have that gift. We need those who will take leadership responsibility for ministry areas and will, as they exercise that leadership, gather teams around them to serve us as a broader body of people in our mission together. I mean, one very important area that we need leadership in is in the area of the kitchen and hospitality. That's something that does take up quite a slice of Dan's time, something that he will need to hand over to someone else. But there are all sorts of other areas. And we need administration. If you're here in Junction Church and you're a bit of an administrator, or you like things a bit organized, you'll definitely be nodding your head. Thankfully, recently we've managed to come up with a directory of regular attendees, but it's taken a while even to get there. We need people who can help us and serve us with administrative gifts. People who have a grace gift to organize, to strategize, to put things in place so that there's something of an order within the church. Even the church in the New Testament hit a moment like that in Acts 6, and there was a need for a offloading of hands-on administrative tasks so that the leaders could focus on the core elements of what they were called to. I think and am praying that my period of time on sabbatical will help me do more of that in terms of handing over, but will help others have an opportunity to stand up and take responsibility. Because there are some plates that I've been spinning that I'm not going to be spinning, and my intention is not to grab hold of those plates as soon as I come back in September. And so that means others will need to, I'll grab that. There's a need for leadership administration as we move forward. And that is always the case when we grow, and it becomes more and more the case the more and more we do grow. So a couple of applications on that first point. Embrace the need for organization. Now, I know for some of us, and I would include myself in this, words like organization, administration, structure, they can sound almost like nasty words. And we can naively think that they have no part within the community of the church. And actually, I wonder whether smaller churches typically attract people who have more of an aversion towards things being organized. I think that probably is the case. And the fact is that things can function without hardly any administration when they're relatively small, but as they grow, they become more complex. We're able to do more. We're able to do a wider range of things. And so there needs then to be more administration. Now, I'm not talking about becoming a military machine, and nor am I talking about quenching the spirit and just relying on human planning. I'm talking about involving individuals, men and women, who have a grace gift on them to bring some helpful administration that facilitates unity and fruitfulness within this local body. And I believe some of you are in this room today. And you're just in your heart right now thinking to yourself, that's me. That's grace on me. And perhaps you've not felt here that that's a gift that can be used. Because we do tend to be quite sensitive to the Spirit. We want to, be prophetic, and we're informal and all of that. And I want to say to you, not the case. We need that gift. And as we move forward and as we grow, we will need more of that gift being exercised amongst us. So we need to embrace the need for organization. Second thing that we need is to be a people of promise. This is the second thing we learn from this account. Moses has this wonderful interaction with Hobab, who, as I said, is either his father-in-law or his brother-in-law. The translations are not quite clear. And Hobab has not been part of their history from the beginning. He's not been there when they left Egypt. He has joined them at a later date. And here Moses gives him an invitation to become part of this journey and to find a place within this ecclesia, within this church in the wilderness. And as a result, to enjoy the blessings of being part of God's covenant people. Moses understands that to be a part of God's people is to be under the blessing and favor of God. And so he says to Hobab, look, come with us and we will do you good. The good that we're enjoying from God, you will begin to have a share in. He's unashamedly clear about that. Moses, of course, has met with Yahweh at the burning bush, and he has heard God's heart for his oppressed people and his desire to deliver them and to give them a land of their own, a land that will flow with milk and honey. Moses is convinced that God has good things in store for them as a community. And so with full confidence, Moses can invite Hobab to join them and be blessed. Not only that, Moses is aware that as a people they are heading towards a land of promise. The best is yet to come, in other words. Moses knows that. And he knows that if Hobab joins them, he will also have a stake in that promise. There will be a portion in the land with Hobab's name on it. He gets to enjoy and enter in to their promise by being a connected part of them as a community. And in fact, as you read forward into the story of the Old Testament, it's very likely that Hobab, we don't know from the passage we read, did actually join them. Hobab was from the clan of Kenites, and we read later in Numbers that the Kenites were allotted a portion in the land. We read in 1 Chronicles that they're actually listed as amongst the tribe of Judah. Now, if joining the Old Testament people of God meant enjoying blessing, and the blessing that was promised to Abraham, and receiving a slice of the promises, how much more substantial are the blessings and benefits that we're invited to enjoy by becoming a part of God's New Testament, New Covenant community? And so as we serve the wider community, as we serve these wonderful folk that are gathering at Poppin Tots, and as we hold out the offer of the gospel, we can, I believe, with complete confidence, say to people, come with us, and we will do you good. You can have a portion of the good things that God has promised us. You see, we've not just been set free from from political oppression, the oppression typified in Egypt. Not just delivered from Pharaoh, but from the corrupting power of sin. We've been transferred from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. We've not just crossed a Red Sea on dry land. We've passed through the waters of baptism to embark on a brand new journey. We don't just have the law written on tablets. We have the Spirit in our hearts. And we don't just follow a cloud, but we follow the very embodiment of Yahweh. We follow Jesus, who is the exact representation of God, the one in whom all the fullness of the deity dwells in bodily form. How much greater are the blessings that we as God's New Testament community enjoy? And so, hey, we can say to people, come on, come with us, and we will do you good. Being part of God's New Testament community, the church, means enjoying God's unlimited favor and grace. What an invitation we have to people. What an offer we extend. Now, that doesn't, of course, mean the challenges end. In fact, it may mean the very beginning of some new challenges. But it does mean being in and amongst the people upon whom God's grace and favor rests. And I tell you, that impacts lives in all sorts of ways. If you're here with us this morning, you are in the zone of God's grace and favor. Being part of a church community that faithfully teaches God's truth, that seeks to embody God's wisdom, means our lives begin to reflect God's design. And as a result, we enjoy blessing. Being in a community that honors the marriage covenant, that values children, that supports widows and those who are isolated and marginalized, that welcomes the stranger, that gives grace to the broken. That's the place of blessing. And there are, of course, plenty of measurable outcomes that support that. And so, hey, in our mission, we can say to people, come with us, and we will do you good. Now, it won't happen overnight. It won't be a life free from challenges. But if you walk with other disciples in the context of a church community that is enjoying God's presence and seeking to live in obedience to his truth, I can say without hesitation, your life will be blessed. It will be blessed. And not only that, you will have a stake in the promises. You will get to be a part of what should be the most hopeful community on earth. Paul speaks of the hope of our calling, the wealth of his glorious inheritance in the saints. 2 Peter speaks of his divine power that's given us everything required for life and godliness through the knowledge of him who's called us by his own glory and goodness, and by these has given us great, very great, and precious promises. That's what we've got in Christ. We've got very great and precious promises. Because of his great mercy, Peter says elsewhere, he has given us new birth into a living hope. Hope is what characterizes our lives and our life together as a church community. And we're not just heading to some physical, geographical land of promise flowing with milk and honey. We're heading towards something far more substantial than that. An eternal home. A city whose builder and maker is God himself. A new heavens, a new earth. A future free from everything that taints and corrupts. Free from sin. Free from sorrow. Free from death. We sung it, didn't we, in that wonderful song, We Will Meet Him in the Air. And so we can say, come with us, and we will do you good. And finally, we learn here about the importance of a part to play. Moses not only invites Hobab to become part of this community so that he too can enjoy God's blessing and have a stake in the promise, he also appeals to Hobab to join them because he recognizes that Hobab has something unique to contribute to their life together. Please don't leave us, Moses says, since you know where we should camp in the wilderness, and you can serve as our eyes. We need you, Hobab. We need your wisdom. We need your skill. We need your eyes. We need you. You've got something unique that will contribute to this body of people. He's not inviting him to come along as a passenger and just enjoy the ride with us, Hobab. We're on our way to the promised land. Take a seat and join the journey. No, that's not what's going on here. He's inviting Hobab to bring all that he is to serve the body of people that he's going to become a part of, to join them on that basis. This all sounds very New Testament, doesn't it? Paul says in 1 Corinthians 12 that there are different gifts but the same Spirit, different ministries but the same Lord, different activities, but the same God works all of them in each person. A manifestation of the Spirit is given to each person for the common good. You see, there are no passengers in the New Testament church, and church membership is not an invitation to get on the bus and take a seat and enjoy the ride. It's an invitation to become part of a body that you connect with, and that you as a member of the body bring your unique contribution to for the common good. There are no passengers in the New Testament church. There are no spare parts. There are no redundant members. Strangely, Hobab clearly doesn't